Hello, welcome everyone to today's podcast episode, The Engineer Whisperer. I am super excited to be here with Mark. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be with you all the way from Melbourne, Australia.
I know, I love when Zoom just allows me to fly places on the other side of the globe. So, this is that case. So, as we start, and before I pose the question, our starting question, tell us a little bit about you for those who don't know you.
Yeah, sure. I'm a 35-year chemical engineer. I studied at Monash University here in Melbourne, in Australia, as I said. So that 35 years has taken me a lot of places, including Seattle, which we've talked about before. I spent probably 7 years in commercial aviation and been a visitor on a number of occasions to Boeing in Seattle, which was a lot of fun, climbing the Space Needle and doing all that sort of fun stuff around Seattle. I think it was actually before Starbucks got going, so I kind of missed that wave. But yeah, we had a lot of fun up there in the Pacific Northwest, and my career's been a really interesting one. I mean, when I started, I was really interested and engaged by process control, one of my strongest subjects at uni, and for that reason, building systems became second nature. So I started to really develop this competence, if you like, but also interest that took me into systems development. And I did that in aviation. I did that most recently in over a decade in grid scale electricity distribution. And I've also done it in the gaming industry as well, not in front of house with gaming machines and poker tables, but there's a lot that happens behind the scenes too, as well as management consulting. So there's been a range of things that I've done over the course of my career that have focused on building systems. And really, that's how I've made a living over the last 35 years. But as I always say, Andrea, the thing about my career, which I pass on to young people and young engineers when I talk to them, I really haven't worked a day in my life. I mean, I get up every morning, I just go and do fun things with cool people. And I think that's been the beauty of an engineering career. It just has been this magic carpet ride for the last 35 years. So I've had a lot of fun, and people have paid me for it along the way. There you go. That's me in a nutshell.
Well, that mindset that you say that you haven't worked a day in your life is what we're here to find out more. So let me start it with this question, and then we'll see where we go. I'm just gonna jump right into it. What was your most meaningful thing that you've done as an engineer so far in your life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And if I think about it, and I say this a lot too, I think it's more about, for those of us that have been around a while, it's more about what we're doing outside the office than what we're doing inside the office. I mean, if you think about any project, if I think about any project I've been involved in or I've delivered on, there's always other engineers that will do that. So there's always someone to deliver a project or get something done, code something. That's not a problem. What I find less of, though, are people that are prepared to invest their time in other areas, other endeavors that basically change the course or the trajectory of someone's life or career. And for me, that's where the most meaning has come from. So to see someone's life change as a result of something, an action that you can take, it's a very simple one to do, whether it's a phone call, a conversation, creating an introduction, whatever it happens to be. That for me is where the most meaning has come from. And if I think about the thing that really resonates for me, it was an initiative that I put to the University of Adelaide in South Australia some years ago now, called Project U. And the idea was to start building relationships for second-year chemical engineering students, because I've always maintained that obviously the difference between where you are and where you want to go are the people you haven't met yet.
Yeah.
So I get very, very heavily invested in my own personal relationships, but encourage others to do the same, particularly at a young stage of a career, because what I find is students, young professionals, they're investing heavily in their technical skills, but they're not investing heavily in their relationship skills. So you can have a brilliant, gifted engineer that isn't great at relationships, and they're wasted on the world because they just can't get to where they should be going.
Yes.
So I decided what I would do is approach the University of Adelaide, where I was living at the time and working. And I would say to them, why don't I take someone special from your second year cohort? It doesn't have to be someone that's outstanding academically, that's fine, but it doesn't have to be that. I'm interested in just a really well-rounded human being that wants to go on and do well in their career. So whether they've got a 65 grade point average or whatever is absolutely fine with me. So we developed a bit of a selection process. We narrowed it down, and for a few years we found a student that looked like they had potential. Then what I did was go and introduce them to all the leaders of the business community in Adelaide. So they would travel around with me, having coffees, office meetings. Some of them have never been into professional office settings.
Yeah.
So this was a new world for them, dealing with the most senior people in the city. And guess what? They started to see how unsophisticated the conversations actually were. They weren't about deep, meaningful, technical things. They're about what human beings do. It's that tactile experience. And so the lights started to go on. Not everything was about momentum, heat, and mass transfer. Not everything was about vector calculus. Not everything was about Laplace transforms. So you could see that light go on, and it would start to shift their thinking about what it took to get to where they wanted to go, because the feedback they were getting from the senior leaders, as I said, had nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with human beings and how we relate, communicate, engage, and build meaningful relationships. Because as you and I both know, when you get to our stage of career, it's simply about the relationships you've got. That's how you get there. That's how opportunities present themselves. So I set up Project U at the University of Adelaide. There was a small, I think $500 we gave them each year just to, I don't know, go and buy some textbooks or do whatever. But it was more about building the relationships and show them how relationships start to build and creating a senior network for them instantly, so that they could then get on the phone or the email to people that I introduced them to and start another conversation about whatever was interesting for them. So Project U is the thing that stands out in my career far more than any project that I've ever delivered. Why? Because as I said at the outset, it's about changing the career and life trajectory of young people. And that's where the meaning comes from. Certainly for me anyway.
So, Mark, of course, the question shows up for me. Why is this important for you? Because so many, as you said, so many engineers can work on their own career and prestige and fame and fortune. And you're breaking the mold of, yes, one can build that too, and can also have time and put the effort into building others up and showing them just a small step, right? Not a lot, but just as you said, introducing them to business leaders, to some senior people, creating this opportunity where the two generations can meet. So where is this coming for you, and why is this important for you?
There's probably a couple of reasons, Andrea. The first one is when I graduated way back in 1987, that was my last year of undergrad, there was no one to help me. And I found it a very lonely, isolating place. So you'd spent 4 years studying for something that obviously every undergrad is really excited about. And then when you finish, it was a huge anticlimax, because then you were basically thrust on the world, but there was no guidance, there was no instruction, there's no career book. There's no rule book or anything you can pick up to say, this is how I should plan and map out my career. And so early on, I was struggling to sort of find my way through the world of work. I mean, the technical side of things, yeah, sure, that was kind of easy, but I sort of quickly grasped, as I reckon anyone that studied engineering do, that once you start working, it's not so much about how well you can code. Everyone can code.
Yeah.
It's not so much about how you solve complex math. Everyone can do that because that's what we're taught to do. But career progression and life progression becomes very quickly about so much more. But there was no one there for me, and that hurt. So I decided at a point in time in my career, it got to a stage where I knew enough people, I'd traveled the world a bit, I'd seen a lot of things, that I would start to shape the lives of others to make that pathway so much easier. And that puts a smile on people's face. So that was the first reason. No one was there for me, and I wanted to be there for someone else. That's just how I'm wired. The other reason is, and you would also know this, once you get into senior positions, even mid-career, everyone's focused on them. Yeah. So people get very competitive. And it occurred to me that there just weren't enough senior people who had the power to change young lives looking behind them to see where they'd come from. So it's really easy to change the life of another human being, but there just aren't enough people invested in it. And so I felt I had an obligation. I mean, there's that cliche we all hear about, you got to help those coming behind, and you got to, give back, and all. I'm sure in
Yeah,
the
you
States.
hear about it, but this is why I wanted you on the show, on this episode, because yes, we hear about it, but then we don't see people doing it. We don't hear the people actually doing it. So you being here, you're already breaking that myth.
Which is fantastic, because I mean, look, here's the thing: we can pick up a phone and do a deal, and we do that all the time in our professional lives and our personal lives, right? We do it all the time,
Yes.
but rarely does someone pick up the phone with the pure intent of changing another life. And it's so easy to do. I mean, I've created positions out of thin air. When you're in executive roles, obviously, you control substantial resources, and you can commit those resources with good governance around them to doing good in the best interests of the shareholders and the organization. So you can create opportunities for people, and that takes one phone call. So with one phone call that takes a minute, you can change a life. Now, my proposition is very simple. If I'm one guy doing that, imagine if 10 do it. Imagine if 100 do it. And imagine if 1,000 do it. You imagine how many lives get changed, and that's just in the profession of engineering. But you multiply that across all professions and all walks of life, we've got a different world in minutes. So they're the reasons why.
And I buy into that, Mark. That is why I, again, wanted to invite you here, so that you inspire others, just like you inspired me when I spoke with you, when I first met you. And we sat down, well, I think over Zoom too.
Yeah.
And just heard your story, and you heard my story. And it's fascinating how, yes, you're on the other side of the earth, but the earth just seems so small in that conversation. And I hope that that's coming through this conversation as well, that no matter where you live, or the opposite, how isolated you might feel that you are, or lonely, there's always someone out there who will pick up the phone for you. And Mark is one of those. So let me just plug in right now that I usually do it at the end of the podcast, but if you're inspired, please reach out to Mark on LinkedIn and say hi to him. All right, so we did that plugin. So back to you. What was challenging in this mindset for you? Because it is a different mindset, as you mentioned several times. We hear that this is maybe how executives, engineering and executives should be behaving. This is what they should be doing, but they're not doing it. So what was challenging about you stepping out there and saying, no, I will do it. I want to do it. I will find a way to do it. And, I will take the first step. What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them?
Truthfully, not many. I mean, the reality is, as I said to you, my motivation was intrinsic, and it was something that was sort of, 1987 is a long time ago. So I've sort of always held it as a core belief since then. So it was in me. All I needed to do was attach myself to other like-minded people at my level, and that was very easy to do, because and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this, and you would understand this from our conversations as well. You surround yourself with the people that you value. So while you're doing deals and business is business, there's this connection that we all have as human beings. We like to work with people we like. So my advice to everyone is be likable, because we like to work with people we like. So, it's really easy then to find the people that I like, that respond to me because they know me and trust me. And then I can bring a second-year chemical engineering student in from the University of Adelaide, and they'll sit there and engage with them as if they've known them for 20 years, because it's something I've asked them to do. So in other words, you build the emotional credits in the bank. And then at that particular time, when I was running the Project U scholarship with the University of Adelaide, I was just drawing down on those credits, and people were more than happy to do it because they could see that this particular kid that was sitting in front of them could be their son or daughter looking for a break. So it made perfect sense to them. So the challenges for me, Andrea, weren't they weren't insurmountable. They were really easy. It was basically, as I said, picking up the phone. I didn't find that particularly difficult at all. I think it's a matter of just, having a sense for or knowing what you want to do, and just charging off and doing in the best sort of, startup way where you just got to iterate quickly. So you start something, put it out there into the universe, and I think Mark Randolph from Netflix, he talks about this on LinkedIn a lot, where you sort of got to take an idea and smash it against reality. So you'll quickly work out whether there's any challenge. And in my particular case, there was none. So I kept going. So, now I'm in the business of doing the same thing, creating introductions for people, which I like to do. And at the same time, teaching those industry engagement skills to young people to give them that career accelerator, because it is the thing that's going to make the difference in your life. A grade point average of 85 is not going to make the difference in your life, nor one at 95, but knowing how to build relationships with people is going to change your life.
So, Mark, I'm curious, if someone's listening to you and you mentioned the words, be likable, put yourself out there, pick up the phone, reach out. Well, what do you say to those who say, well, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to pick up the phone and someone tell me that I'm not likable or that they don't have the time for me. How did you deal with those rejections? How did you move past them and still kept going?
But that's a really good question. That's a very insightful question too, because this is something I think holds a lot of people back. And I find this a lot in the conversations I have with students and young professionals here in Australia, particularly those that are studying and coming to Australia from other countries. So if they're international students, they're particularly challenged because they may have language difficulties. There's cultural challenges as well. Things don't work here the way they might work at home, and they don't know anyone. So they're starting from scratch, not only professionally, but personally as well. So it's a particularly difficult environment. So rejection is going to be part of their world, and it gets very deflating. So I understand that challenge. What I do say to them, and this is my own situation, in fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've probably been rejected 3 times. I get ghosted all the time. I've been working 35 years. So it happens. And that is my key message to everyone about rejection. You will get rejected. I mean, if you spend time, you Google, all of the entrepreneurs out there that we idolize these days, their stories are just full of rejection constantly.
Yeah.
Everyone that's got a startup, whether it's SaaS or whatever they're doing, they're getting rejected. Investors don't want to talk to them. People don't want to engage with them. This happens. So my point is, this is a truism. The more you're getting rejected, the closer you're getting to what it is you truly want. So rejection not only is part of the story, it's actually essential, because it steers you ultimately to where success for you will lie. Now, that brings about another challenge and another opportunity, and that is to build resilience.
Yes.
Because rejection for all of us hurts. We're human beings.
Yes.
So therefore, it doesn't matter whether it's you, whether it's me, or anyone else, leading a Fortune 500 company in the States, you know what? They're getting rejected too, and they're human beings, and it hurts.
Yes.
It's a fact. So these techniques for developing resilience, whatever that means for you as an individual, is really, really important. But I think once you build a cadence, the more you get rejected, ironically, I think in some ways the stronger that you get, particularly, I'll put a caveat on it, if you're taking advice from others whose opinion you value. So one of the things that I've always made a point of doing is, something hasn't gone according to the game plan that I've built for myself, what I like to do is take advice. So if I've missed out on a job, and I talk to young people about this all the time, get as much feedback as you can from the employer as to why you didn't get the job, but that won't always be forthcoming. But if there's someone in your world, your network, family, friends, colleagues, teammates, sporting team members, whoever, that can give you feedback on you that will build you up and pump you up, go and talk to them. Ask them, what it is about you that makes you special, because we're all unique human beings, which means we all have our special qualities, which means we're all excellent at something, and usually more than one or two things. So get the feedback. So solicit it, ask for it. What makes me the person I am? What's good about me? Yeah, I'm getting kicked in the teeth. Life's hard. People keep saying no, but every no is one step closer to yes. And as I said, rejection is a natural human experience. You can't get every job you apply for. It's not going to happen.
It's good that you're not getting every job. Let me just put
Exactly.
that there. Looking back in my career, I'm so happy I didn't get a few jobs that some of the hiring managers said no, because turns out I found out later that actually wasn't the job for me. I didn't want to be there to do that and to work with those people.
Yeah, it's kind of like dating, right? So when you're young and you're dating, you're not marrying every person you meet. So you're going on a few dates and you're finding out who works for you and who doesn't, and where ultimately you're going to land, and what future family life looks like from there. So you don't
Mm,
marry everyone you go on a date with. Similarly, you don't take a job with every person you interview, every organization you interview with. It's the same deal. So what you're doing is you're exploring, you're generating feedback. These are a whole series of data points that you can use to form a better view of yourself and what you want. Because if someone doesn't want you, the message is clear. You don't want them either. So that's why rejection is it's almost a self-correcting mechanism. There you go. There's an engineering sort of a metaphor for the whole thing, right? It's a self-correcting mechanism. It keeps you on a path to where success will ultimately lie for you. So it's about being able to reframe
yes,
the
yes.
rejection. I think that's really, really key. In addition to building these resilience techniques, so you're not taking it personally, it doesn't hurt too much for too long.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I love what you're saying, that rejection, it's part of the game, it's the truism. So accept it. I think a lot of people are ignoring it as a, oh, there is this thing, this surprising thing that will happen, versus if you know that it's part of the game that you're playing, then you're gonna build it in as a risk factor, and then you to continue on what you said, you will understand that rejection builds resilience, and then resilience builds the person that who you are. So the
That's
more data
that's
points, the more information you find out.
Hey, that is exactly right. I mean, they talk about the two certainties in life, death and taxes. I'd add rejection to that. Death, taxes, and rejection. They are certainties in life. So if you expect it
Mhm.
and you know it's coming,
Yep.
when it arrives, it's not as painful.
Yeah. Yes. And then I want to underline what you said. If it will be hurtful and comes with some pain, then have people like Mark in your network who you can reach out to, that you can talk with them, those who will not reject you. Is this concept that I talk about often, that maybe somebody rejected you for a job not because of who you are. They could be, hundreds of reasons of why, but then there are the friends who will never reject you because they know you and they believe you and they trust you. So have those people that you can go back to and talk about the rejection to people. That's where also where you are building your resilience. Talking about rejection also builds resilience, because the more we're able to reflect and accept ourselves, the more again we learn about our strengths and talents, so then we can turn around and adjust it with the direction of where we want to go and who do we want to become as an engineer and as a human being.
Exactly. You nailed it. I couldn't have put it better myself. And the corollary of that for me is this job search, or in your life, you're looking for a partner or whatever it is, it's simply about what I call fit. Job search is is all about fit. You've just got to find the right fit. Similarly with, as I said, in the dating game, ultimately, you're going to find someone to marry or partner with. It's about fit. And rarely do any of us get that right from the get-go, particularly when you're young. So you keep looking at all stages of life, and I'm no different as a 35-year veteran of the engineering profession. To this day, I'm still looking for fit. The people I want to work with, the organizations I want to work with, it's about fit.
Yeah.
So that's what you've got to stay in search of. And like, you and I both know too, when you find fit, you know it. You know
Yes.
when it works.
Yes. Listen to your instinct, listen to your gut, notice. So, Mark, tell us maybe one more thing that you see as you talk to young engineers. That what are some of the other challenges that they are facing that you're helping them through?
I think there are a few, Andrew. I don't think there's any one thing that they're particularly challenged by. I think there's a number of things. I think it's about finding your way in the world. It's about it's fear of making the wrong choices and decisions.
Yeah.
So I think it's about building confidence that the pathway that you've chosen is the right one. It's about deflation because they leave the world of study for the world of work, and then they get into work and they see it doesn't bear any real resemblance to what they've been doing for the last 4 or 6 years.
Yeah.
There's, as I said, in the case of international students, it's integration into a new country, a new way of life, basically. And that brings with it its challenges too. So I think in these conversations that I'm having, it's really about, as I said, it's connecting as human beings. And I think while I've been working a bit longer than they have, ultimately the same challenges are mine, even at this late stage of career. Yes, I've got much longer relationships that build over a much longer period of time. But ultimately, you've still got to go through the process of getting to know someone. Because when you strip it all away, as I said, engineering's a people business. Yeah, there's the tech, I get all the technology, there's the tech, and there's all that kind of stuff, and that's really cool. But the world moves forward through people, and I think this is lost on engineers. So one of the questions, for example, to answer your question, that I got on campus all the time, particularly for 3rd and 4th years who are doing the more advanced math in their degrees, for example, and the application of all the science and engineering principles had nothing to do with the engineering. It was, how do you get a job? That was the question. How do you get a job? So we used to talk through the strategies
I love that
of
question.
getting a job. Now, that sounds really basic, but when you start to unpack that, and I've said this many times, when you start to move into the latter years of your college degree, as it is for you guys, and university degree here, you move out of the engineering game into the marketing game. So you need to think, you're in the marketing business. So when you leave university or college, you're no longer in the engineering business, you're in the marketing business. Your engineering skills will grow. Continuing professional development occurs. You do all these courses, you do all this cool stuff. You go to conferences all over the world, as I used to in Seattle. And life's a dream. So your engineering stuff's going to grow. But the reality is, to get where you want to go, wherever that is, you're in the marketing business. You've got to sell yourself. And you've got to get good at that. And selling is not a skill that comes naturally, I don't think, in my experience, to human beings, but particularly engineers.
No,
So,
they
yeah, so because you're in the marketing business, you've got to learn how to sell. And so when I say that to students and young professionals, that you're in the marketing business, they're kind of looking at me because they've spent 4 years doing this really high grade math, they're coding, all the tech, the application of all engineering principles. And then they're going, you're telling me I'm in the marketing game? And I'm saying, yeah, you're in the marketing game, because that's going to make the difference between where you are and where you want to go. So I spend a lot of time talking about marketing, more so these days than I talk about engineering.
So give us one, because I know we're we're getting close to the end. Give us one concept from marketing that you like to talk
Okay.
about.
Okay.
I'll let you choose one because I know there are many.
Now, here's the one I love to talk about: differentiation.
Mm.
Differentiation. So everyone that's in 4th year at every college in the US at the moment, or every university in Australia, thinks that they're fantastic, and they should, because they're in their final year of a 4 or 5 year degree.
Yes.
They've done the hard yards. It's a really intensive workload for everyone that's done an engineering degree. We all know that. And so they're feeling great about themselves. As an employer, though, I've got some bad news. When they finish that degree, and it doesn't matter whether they're at Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, the University of Melbourne, Monash, where I studied, it doesn't matter which university or college they've gone to. When they start working, guess what? They're the same as everyone else again. And to an employer who's presented with, imagine the graduating class at Stanford or Princeton or Yale, right?
Or all of them, or if
they've
you
all,
put all of them together, it's
exactly. They're all the same again.
yeah.
So to an employer, you look exactly the same as all the other graduates. So therefore, back to my marketing analogy, it's about differentiation. How can you make yourself different in the eyes of an employer? Because any difference will give you a competitive advantage. And I'll give you an example. I use this example all the time. It's very trite, but it makes the point. An Olympic gold medal would be nice to put on your CV alongside your degree in engineering, right? So you've got a degree in chemical engineering from University of Michigan or Princeton or whatever, and you've won an Olympic gold medal. Now, to an employer, that would stand out, wouldn't it? Obviously. It's nice to have an Olympic gold medal, but what does it say? Let's say they were a swimmer. They get up at, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning. They're down at the pool at 4. They're swimming all day. They're on top of their nutrition. They've got their coaches, both the physical, the technical aspects of the swimming. They're working on their mindset. All of this stuff, that's really attractive stuff for an employer. Yeah. So if you've got an Olympic gold medal or you've participated in the Olympics and didn't even get on the podium, doesn't matter. It looks fantastic on a CV. Similarly, if you've got a startup, if you've tried to do something but failed, put that on your CV. Anything that makes you look different, makes you stand out from everyone else who looks exactly the same at all stages of a career, by the way, then you're onto something. So differentiation is the one thing I always lock on to. It's marketing 101, obviously. But if you can create that point of difference, people notice, particularly employers or anyone who has the power to change that career or life trajectory of yours.
Yeah. And this is especially important because I think, I mean, I see it all the time, even my son, the young generation. I think let me turn it that I did it too. I was I was this person too. I think everybody who's growing up and finally I'm free to do stuff that of my choice. You try a lot of things and then you find some things, you mentioned swimming, that you like doing. So it's not just for the Olympics and for the gold that you're doing it, but you love doing something that is worth putting on the resume. Something that if you consistently did something that brought you joy, where you put in the effort, the love, the learning, put it on. Yes, be aware of it. Find that we all have it. That is my belief.
And I think you've hit on a really, really important point, Andrea, too, because I've got this little saying that I use a lot when people are coming to me for jobs or I'm interviewing or whatever. Show me you're a human being. You don't have to prove to me or show me you're an engineer. I know that because you've got a degree and you've got a CV that's got all your qualifications and achievements. Get all that. Show me you're a human being. Don't show me you're an engineer because I already know that. And that goes to your point about building all these other things around us that makes us this rich, unique, crazy, wonderful person that has a special place in the world that we all owe it to ourselves to find.
Yes. Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Mark. Well, we are at the end of our podcast. And one of the things that I do at the end is that I give the mic back to my guests. So today, would like to invite you to have the last words. Close us out. What would you like to leave us with today, Mark?
Well, I'll just pick up on that last comment that I made, Andrea. I think for every single one of us, there's a place that we're meant to be. And I think I used to talk about this in a professional context as working at the highest level. So there's nothing wrong with working at Burger King. Absolutely nothing wrong. We've all done part-time jobs. If, however, you've got an astronaut in you, or you've got a software startup, or somehow you think you can move the world forward or put a dent in it, then my belief is that's what you should be doing, and more importantly, heading for, because you can't do it in one small jump, right? So you're gonna really push hard and make things happen. But I think all of us have that special place in the world that belongs to us. Keep moving there. That's really my message. And I spend a lot of time with young people, as you know, selling that message. Keep moving there. There's a guy I know actually grew up in the States and flew for the US Navy. And he said something many, many years ago. He lives in Australia now, but he said something because he married an Australian that he met at uni over there. And she moved back and he came with her. And when he was going through flight school, he said, they used to talk about the airplanes, different airplanes he could fly. He wanted to fly fighters. And the first exposure he had to the, I think it was the F-18 at the time, but the instructor said to him, what I want you to do is I want you to get up there and look inside that cockpit. And he couldn't work out why he was asking to do it, because he'd seen cockpits before. But he climbed up on top, looked inside the cockpit, and the instructor got up next to him and said, someone has to sit in that seat. It might as well be you. So obviously fighters are highly contested in the military. Everyone wants to fly fighters and all that sort of stuff. And, it's hard to get there, obviously. But the fact was that someone has to sit in that seat. It might as well be you. And when he told me that story, it immediately resonated with me. It stuck with me forever. So to everyone out there, we've all got our own version of that F-18 cockpit seat. Someone has to sit in it. It might as well be you. Keep moving forward.
And on that note, thank you very much for being here, for sharing all this with us and inspiring us. And again, if you're inspired by what you heard Mark share, please reach out to him. I'll put his contact info in the notes. And again, thank you, Mark, very, very much.
Absolute pleasure, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to get back up to the Pacific Northwest one of these days. It's been a long, long time, and I'm long overdue for a return visit. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.